Am I so out of touch? No, it's the children who are wrong.
So this is how you know that I am not out of touch. Look at my new Maki figure. Just finally got it yesterday in the mail. Freaking amazing cat to Kaisen. And honestly, that I'm buying this stuff is you know that I'm also making good video games. So, hello everyone here. In this video, I'm talking about are game developers out of touch? And yes, they definitely are. Not everyone, of course, but a lot of them are. And especially with Bethesda coming out saying that, no, but the game is supposed to be boring. Have you ever seen the moon landing? There's nothing there to do. So that our game is boring on purpose. We're like, that's also an interesting defense, I suppose, right? Before the video, guys, links below, I have a previous video I made about why younger developers, like coming out right now, Culture One, are also out of touch. And I guess in context, those developers are never been in touch to begin with. So links below for that. That's I think one of my best videos I made this year. Long video, 2 of them covering kind of the issues with the newer, younger developers. But this video here, I guess we can talk more about older developers, or generally speaking, right? You know, game development, right? So I'll give you some examples that I have been out of touch, and especially one game that I worked on that sold very poorly, and I will explain one reason why. And the CEO was very out of touch. And of course we addressed the Bethesda stuff and so on as well then. But if you video, please subscribe, press the like button, and let's get into it. To give context to the video first of all then, what I'm talking about is the Bethesda design director of Starfield coming out and blaming all the players. So he made this very long thread, right, like 15 plus tweets. I am definitely not gonna go over them at all in this video. I don't care that much. I just don't. I never followed this like mess tweet post. I don't say why. But anyway, it has like over 500,000 views or whatever. Right? So quite big a few years ago here. And basically, it is the Skinner meme, right? As the start of the video, it's Skinner meme. It's just like, it's not my fault that no one likes my game. It's all the gamer's fault, right? Every gamer is wrong and I'm right, you know. that basically is his. That summarizes the tweets, okay? Basically, I won't go over more than that. But before we go into why he's wrong, of course, I have to say one thing though. To some extent, the context here, sometimes he's right though. I have to say it to be fair, right? So, to give you an example, when I worked in a video game, it's like 6 years ago now, 7 years ago, the COO, he was very, very too much into listening to the players. And that might sound like he's like, you know, correct, right? Listen to the players, to the gamers. But to some extent, you can't just be like obsessively, you know, listening to everyone's bad ideas, right? Okay? Like, I worked on many games in my life, and you get a lot of mails and comments or whatever at the forums. And obviously, if you listen to everyone's ideas, right, it's going to be a terrible game. And especially, I mean, obviously, a lot of people are going to have different opinions of what they want to see in the game, right? So if you want to try to listen to everyone's ideas, you will get nowhere, because it will be, like, many of their ideas, of course, won't be able to be possible at the same time, right? But yeah, I had this big issue with the CEO that he basically would be like, I have this vision, right? This is what I want in my design. I'm the lead designer, director. This is what I want for this stage, right? And he would be like, oh, but some people are complaining that the game is too hard, you know? And I'm like, no, it should be hard, right? So we had that kind of beef. That was basically the gist of it, I think, from a general context. He would complain to me, people saying it's too hard, and I would say, but we're making a hard game, so I don't care what those players, right? It's kind of like, you know, imagine going to the people working on Elden Ring, right? And saying that, oh, some people on the internet are saying the game is too hard, we have to make the Elden Ring too easier. Like, no! Right? I mean, like, you know, sometimes you have to understand that some of the players, of the whatever, or journalists are completely wrong, right? And they are out of touch. Especially in the Elden Ring case, I would say that the journalists are out of touch, right? They want their super easy game, and the actual game was a hard game, right? But basically, in the game I worked on, 6-7 years ago, it's also a very hard game, in a different way than Elden Ring. It's a multiplayer game, but still, a very hard game, and sometimes CEO come and complain to me, oh, the game is too hard and this and that, and we get in, you know, people are writing on the, you know, the emails and community forums, it's too hard, it's gonna be easier, and I'm like, no, we're making a hard game. The premise is that the game is hard. I'm not gonna, you know, pander to these people, right? We're making a game for people that want to have a hard game, right? So it's also kind of like, what's the demographic, you know? What's the game? But I just want to address that first before we get into this out of touch stuff, because sometimes you have to also be a visionary yourself, right? So sometimes, to be fair, the gamers are wrong, or the customers are wrong. You're like, no, I am right here. You don't understand my vision, right? That being said, of course, your vision has to be actually a good vision, I suppose, right? And that's gonna come back to this moon image. First of all, I want to say one thing here, that I was actually at Kennedy Space Center just a few days ago. It's like 2 weeks now, yeah. So this is when I bought these glasses. It's when I dressed that, guys. Talking about space here, but anyway. So the Bethesda developer, right? He's just like, oh, but space is boring. The game should be boring. And why is he wrong then? So I think, first of all, it's a general issue that people are making really boring game on purpose, right? And I actually had a discussion with a colleague just this week. We had another business trip this week, and we discussed it on a trip then a lot, actually, me and him, about like, you know, some games are boring now, right? And we haven't even read about this thing, but it's very similar, because the thing is that a lot of games are too realistic, right? Or they're too much like, here's a deep storyline or whatever. And I mean, I love, you know, JRPGs with great storylines, whatever, but you have to always still have good gameplay. And what it does remind me of, to some extent, I suppose, is Stan Lee talking about wokeness or whatever. So Stan Lee made this really good interview a few years before he died, where he discussed, you know, that everyone is, Iceman is gay or whatever and so on, right? And he made a very good point, I think. There's like, because, you know, Stan Lee was very progressive, right? You know, there was lesbian and so on, a lot of that stuff. However, Stan Lee said that, but all of this progressive stuff, right, ergo, the woke stuff, could never be in front of the actual storyline. And he was writing, you know, this thing behind me here, or a Spider-Man story, right? A Spider-Man story should be very progressive, in Stan Lee's mind himself too, right? But the progressiveness of, for example, let's say that Spider-Man has a lesbian friend or whatever, but that can't be in front of the actual storyline, you know what I mean? It can be part of the storyline, but shouldn't be the focus of the storyline. And that actually, I think, is a good explanation of why a lot of people don't dislike, so to speak, woke stuff, right? And I do feel it's a very similar thing with a lot of these games coming out, right? Starfield, of course, being a good example of that. But even more so, of course, The Last of Us 2 or whatever, right? Where it's more about the message that the game is presenting rather than actually having a good gameplay, right? I think Death Stranding is example 2. I think it's a terrible game, right? I think it's an incredible bad game. It's so boring. I have, you know, zero hope for Kojima's next game, right? Because I found Death Stranding, again, incredibly bad. But because it's like a weird game with some kind of storyline, people like it somehow, but the actual gameplay, right, is so it's just tedious, right? I hate it. I just hate it. And I made this kind of joking review about Starfield a few months ago, was out, but I do think on the same thing, right? Starfield is a lot of emptiness. I don't think Starfield is a very good game. I don't think it is. Of course, I made like a parody review, but obviously I was like over exaggerating truth, right? Because no, the game is pretty boring. The game really is this moon landing thing. There's so many empty stuff in Starfield. There's so much travel time, and the game truly has empty planets, right? I think it's to talk about, because the design director then is defending this, right? Saying that it should be boring. Because when this guy went to the moon, in reality, there was no one at the moon. There was just 3 humans there. So it was kind of boring, actually. Like I said, it's there. And I'll make more videos about it later, but yeah, oh my god. I was so happy when I was touching the moon rock. I was like, moon rock, spin the moon! But that's not the video, guys, sorry for that. But anyway, it's such a weird thing, because like when the astronauts goes to the moon, right, it's about being the first at the moon. The goal isn't to be like meeting aliens or encounter a quest or whatever, right? The actual goal is to get to the moon, because it's so harder, right, to actually manage to get to the moon. Like I said, I was at Kennedy Space Center, and you know, it takes millions of dollars, 500,000 people involved, or to actually construct this stuff, right, to actually get to the moon. That is the actual challenge, fun factor, right, to actually get to the moon. But in these games, like the Bethesda Starfield game, which again I think is a pretty boring and bad game, right, the actual hardship isn't to navigate to get to the planet, right? It's just get there, and then you have a quest or something, and it's an empty moon. It's boring, and it's just like a boring gameplay experience. And I guess, like I said, if it's supposed to be comparable to reality of going to the moon, it would have to be something like an actual really hard, you know, time actually constructing that, right? However, though, the quest would still be to get to the moon, right? Because if you just get to an empty planet and you can't do anything, it's just really boring again, right? Even if it's hard to get there. But if you compare it to reality, getting to the moon, for example, means you can bring home moon rock, right? You can examine that stuff, you can do different testing and so on. So in reality, going to an empty planet can give you a lot of scientific knowledge, a lot of testing and so on, a lot of stuff you can learn from that. But again, in a game that doesn't have that stuff, right? It's pointless. So if anything, I think it points out into the issue of Starfield and similar games. If you're gonna have this emptiness, this like barren, you discover nothing, right? And it's a terrible video game. If you're gonna have that, I suppose you need to be able to, do something with it, right? If you find an empty planet, maybe you can build stuff there, colonize it, maybe you can construct something, maybe you can, maybe you can terraform it. You would have to have something else, right? That you as a gamer could do with emptiness, so to speak, or at least then get some science stuff and improve some other stuff you have in your ship or whatever. Right? So if anything, it just tells you that he doesn't even know what we're talking about. Of course he doesn't, but I mean, he's out of touch of being a space guy as well. He's out of touch as a game developer, and he's out of touch as what it actually means to go to the moon, right? Because again, going to the moon is so much more about just like getting there. How do I get there? And how can I improve my science, from that, right? Which you don't do in those games. Now then, the bigger issue is of course how generally out of touch these developers are, right? I see some people saying that one reason is because they've been there too long, so playing games and so on, and there's some truth to that. I made videos about it earlier, like I said, this year, and I brought up my Maki figure, right? I just bought this figure, and honestly to me, it's almost like this is the most nerdy self-insert ever, but generally, I don't trust game developers, not game designers, that don't like this stuff. I don't trust them. Do not trust game developers that doesn't buy figures. Seriously, because as a kid, right, growing up, you want to have your Maki figure, you want to have your Yamato figure, so on. That is what you want when you're young, and you like stuff. You like video games, you like anime, right? So you buy this kind of stuff, right? You have to ask your parents and so on, and get the money, and you can buy like one figure per year. So as an adult, I have a lot of money, because I'm rich or whatever, right? So now I can buy like 10 figures per year or whatever, or like one per month or whatever, right? Who cares? But my point is that, why would I not then buy what I want, right? I want to buy this stuff, I want to buy the poster, I want to buy every goddamn figure, I want to buy every, video game that I have, that I can make, whatever, right? And I am honestly always worried, genuinely worried, when I work with anyone in the game industry, they don't do that. I mean, and obviously I said, if you have like kids, so you have to spend money and paying rent and stuff, of course. But it's weird to me that I know so many people that they're basically, they work in the game industry and they have all this money, right, compared to being kids, and they don't spend that money on buying new games, new figures, new, I don't know, posters, whatever. Like they kind of lost their youth, whatever. That is very true. Yes, game developers, a lot of them, they genuinely do lose their. They are out of touch, but I think one of the biggest reasons is, I guess, simply because the game developers, a lot of them are out of they lose their nerdness, the geekness, right? And I always say this thing in my previous videos too. I don't hire game designers that are not nerds, basically, right? You have to know the math, the algebra, all stuff too, algorithms, but you also have to still love video games. For example, I had this meeting last week with a math professor. He's like a genius guy in AI, okay, very, very good in AI. We've had this long meeting, right? And this guy, we talked for like 3-4 hours, and he's like, he could talk for like 10 hours, right? Just about AI algorithms, right? He loves that stuff, right? So even if he's only doing AI stuff, right, and he's done it for like 20 years of his life or whatever, he still loves it, right? That guy, he's an amazing AI developer, or an AI developer, AI more researcher. But the point, he's an amazing AI guy, right? Because he still loves it. He when he was young, he liked agent and AI stuff, right? And he grew up, he got a PhD and so on, right? And he still likes it, right? That's what you also want in your game developer, especially in your game designers. I always say the thing, especially in your designers, they need to still have that spark, right? And I think that's kind of the video. I have to say, guys, I think a lot of people, they lose the spark when they go older. Maybe they get kids, and they get married, and they stop playing the games and so on. Right? But I also look for that. Because it always worries me when I know so many people that are grown-ups, right? They're in the 450s, they have $1 million on their bank account, and they don't spend their money on anything geeky or nerdy or gamey or whatever, any other Marvel or anime, I don't care, but whatever you like, They don't spend any money on the hobbies anymore. It is very strange. Of course, given the context that isn't like you just bought a house or something. I mean, obviously, if you're 45 and you have to just spend all your money to buy a new house or something, I mean, of course. But you get my point, in a general sense. And a lot of my coworkers are like, how can you buy so much stuff? I'm like, yeah, because I spend maybe like, I don't know, a few $100s a month on this stuff. Because I have a pretty high salary, so I can spend stuff. Like of course I would. You know, that's been my dream my whole life. You know, like, this is like, yeah, you know. But basically, I think that you don't want to have. I think it's a very true that the game developers outgrow who they are, who used to be, or whatever. And it doesn't disappoint me, right? But anyway, I hope this video. Subscribe, like button, and check out my earlier video earlier this year where I discussed more why the younger developers never were in touch to begin with, right? And if you combine these two videos, I think you get a good explanation of why they're generally out of touch. But anyways, you guys have a great day.